Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for On the Money, presented by Embassy National Bank.
Hi, everybody. This is Joe Moss, and welcome to On the Money. This show is sponsored by Embassy National Bank. We are a nationally chartered bank, and our deposits are insured by the FDIC. We try to bring you topics that will help you run your small business better, because at Embassy National Bank, we really do try to help small businesses. In fact, that was the foundation of this show, was try to get topics out there that you could listen to and help you run your business better. In fact, we've had a couple of shows that we've got listenership up to over 400,000 listenings. We average about 160,000, so this is This has worked rather well, and we appreciate everybody listening. Today, we're going to talk to David Kim. David, welcome.
Hey, how you doing, Joe?
He is the founder and vice chairman of C2 Education, and we're going to let him talk about how the business got started and what his has, I guess I'm going to use the word exploded into. And we're going to talk about some of the challenges that that David and his partners have had along the way, but I think you're really going to enjoy the show. So let's get into it. So David, welcome.
Hey, how you doing, Joe?
Good. Tell us about C2 Education.
Yeah, so C2 is a company that helps high school students get into the college of their choice, helps them kind of navigate what colleges and universities they might want to get into, and we teach them how to get in there. So we help them with test scores, we help them with their grades at school, we help them with their application, how to write their essay, and then ultimately we also help find ways for them to pay for it as well too.
Wow. So it's geared, it's kind of like supplemental to what they're doing in high school now. It is.
So it is geared toward the high school student who's looking to go to college, but obviously there's a lot of choices out there, and it's really helping them with that whole process.
I'm glad you do that, because we were, the let's put it this way, the more motivated your high school student is, the more you want to try to put him or he or she into the right school.
Absolutely.
And maybe think out of the box a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't want to insult Bulldog fans, but maybe not just go to University of Georgia. Right?
That's correct. So, I mean, it's funny. I mean, a lot of the students we work with, so we're in 16 states now. We have, over 220 centers nationwide. We have physical brick and mortar centers that students come to after school. They're typically located, near their high schools, probably within a mile of their high school. And, it's funny. Every state we go to, if it's in Georgia, 90% of the students want to be a Bulldog. If you're in North Carolina, 90% want to be a Tar Heel.
Right.
If you're in Maryland, 90% want to be a Terp. So
right.
it's really funny just how much of an effect the big state universities have, and especially when college football season comes around, it has an even more dramatic effect. One of the things that we try to do is really explain to students that there are choices beyond that might be a better fit for those students, and that was the real big opportunity that we noticed, that there were a lot of students who weren't really thinking out of the box, weren't really thinking beyond kind of the four walls of their immediate neighborhood and what their friends were talking about. And really being able to show them that all these other options might exist, these options that might, be a better fit to their personality, be a better fit to their interests, be a better fit to their potential future, was really eye-opening for a lot of students. And that's how we really came upon this idea of C2, actually.
How did you get started?
It's funny. There's a lot of businesses, I guess, that start out of college dorm rooms. There's Facebook and there's Microsoft and Dell. I had the good fortune of going to Harvard, and so a friend of mine, had an opportunity to help students, in a myriad of subjects. And as we were working with, students on a volunteer basis as well as for a per pay basis as well in terms of private tutoring, we really noticed that parents and students just had a lot of questions about colleges beyond, the ones that they were familiar with, like Boston College, MIT or Harvard that were there in Massachusetts, and really wanted to see what that whole spectrum was. The other thing was really seeing that students, there's so many students who have the potential to get into these great schools, but who don't necessarily have that individual there to really encourage them and mentor them, and really show them how to accomplish that. And so, that was just an opportunity that we really recognized as something that parents and students would really appreciate, where there would be a win-win situation where we could, make a business out of it, but also do something that really helped families at the end of the day.
So what started, was it the money aspect or the passion for helping the student?
It was definitely the passion aspect of it, right? We really saw ourselves. So Jim and I, he was a classmate of mine at Harvard, lived literally above me in my dormitory. We really had a great time, helping high school kids, and even
Did this happen before you got to Harvard or while you were at Harvard?
This is while we were at Harvard. So this is our freshman year.
Was that something that Harvard wanted you to do, or how did you get involved with high school students at that point? Because freshman year of college for me, the last thing I was thinking about was helping a high school student.
Well, there were a couple of things. So as a college student, you don't always have a lot of walking around money. So it was always good to be able to tutor students. But we also did it initially on a volunteer basis.
Okay.
Harvard is really strong in its messaging to its students in terms of giving back, via public service. And so we first started as being volunteer tutors, and then there were for-pay parents who started contacting us, who heard that we were tutoring these students for free, but they wanted to pay for their particular students because they weren't at need. And then we really got into it, really wholeheartedly from there.
So while at Harvard, how much did the business grow while you were there?
Well, I think Harvard is great in really supporting its students on ventures like this. So, all the things on campus are actually student-run. The dormitory cleaning service, the dry cleaner, the stores, the bartending service. If you're an alumni that want to have a party at your house, all these organizations and groups are student-run, and so. We were able to get some stipend and some money to really help launch this as a real kind of quote unquote business run by students. And thereafter we started creating a training program, studying more about educational methods and pedagogy. How do you best teach students, as well as beginning to learn how to market what our product would eventually become.
Well, one of the things that we run into a lot on this show are the people that start a business because of a passion they have, and then they quickly realize that I've got to move away from the actual doing of the passion and start running a business.
Correct.
And where did you hit that mark?
That was pretty immediate because an individual can only scale so much, right? And in building a business is really about scaling it up. And so, how do you create a model that's scalable? We quickly came to the conclusion that if we are doing all the tutoring on a daily basis, you just can't scale. One person can only get to so many places so much. Initially, when we were students, this was a home tutoring service where we would go to people's houses, or we would meet them at a Barnes & Noble or Starbucks or whatever was convenient, for the customer and us at the time, and kind of looking at, all right, what is scalable? Having people actually come to you where you wouldn't have to deal with travel time, where you could, hire, a tutor for a block of time and be able to sell that block of time to a parent. And so that's where the whole notion of actually having physical centers that were in close proximity to where students came about is how do you build this into a business? Just going door to door just doesn't do that.
All right. And what year did you decide, all right, we're going to have our very first geographic location?
So we started thinking about that in 1998, and then we ended up started building it in 99 and opened its door basically in the beginning of 2000.
Was this a standalone building? Was it a strip center?
It was in a strip center.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was your cost to build out, just out of curiosity at that point?
So I mean, it's funny. I mean, building a learning center out. You need to obviously have the build out. You need to have the material, the curriculum. And so we had to license a lot of those things in the beginning. We didn't have our own, intellectual property that we could leverage, just because we didn't have a team of curriculum writers. And so, all those factors, loaded in was around $100,000 if we did it ourselves, if we were the general contractor, if we went and got the permitting and so on and so forth. So we had to find a way to get that money, which was, the next dilemma in launching this business.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you were in need of $100,000. How did you go about getting it?
So we put together a business plan that we felt was pretty conservative in its numbers, in terms of how many students we need to attain to break even. We also hedged our bets a little bit. The first C2s were actually a little bit more broader in scope. They weren't just focused on the high school student. We did elementary, middle, high school. We did enrichment in art, music, the whole driver's education. I mean, there was a lot of things that we had added on there. And so we first went to family members, thinking, we'll get some money from family members or people we know. There were some, investment groups that were, making big investments in the internet at the time before the dot-com crash in 2001. And so we hit the road, asking for money with this business plan we put together. Unfortunately, we got no's from everybody. So it's not unusual, hearing a pitch from a 21-year-old, not even yet graduated college kid in saying, hey, we have this grand vision. We feel like these centers are going to work, and here's the pitch. So originally, I had saved up money to go to graduate school, to get my master's degree. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up, I'd put a deposit down. I ended up getting a refund for that. And I plowed, so I had around $50,000 saved up for that I actually plowed into the business. My partner Jim had another 10 that he had saved. And then at the time, whether it was right or wrong, it was very easy for college students to get a lot of credit cards. We probably had 20 credit cards between the two of us. And, those were subsequently maxed out as well. So that's how we got to the number.
So I think this is an important step, because a lot of people would have gotten to that step and would have said, you know what, this isn't going to work. Yeah. Let's talk about the business plan. Why do you think people said no? Was it too big? Was it too grand? Was it not big enough? Was it just we're just not buying into it? What do you think the no's were from?
Yeah, so I think it was learning about, how do you sell to individuals, right? So that's something that in the beginnings of building the company, we had to become very, very, skilled at and attuned at to be able to survive as a company. I think, we had not yet launched a business. We had no debt. We were not underwater by any means. And so, that urgency, I don't think was immediately apparent when we were going around, to our family members and relatives and friends that we knew, in terms of pitching the business. In terms of the math and the logic, it basically, that business plan is what we replicated when we built our first center and subsequent centers. So, the logic and the math and the assumptions behind it were actually very sound. I think what was not sound was our ability to convince people that, hey, you can believe in us, right? Like we can actually do this. We can actually get a return on your investment. We can actually, build a sustainable business that's going to thrive. I think what they saw were just, two college kids who maybe, had a little too much fun every now and then.
Well, listen, you're listening to On the Money, brought to you by NBC National Bank. This is Joe Moss. We're talking to David Kim, and he and his partner started a company called C2, and we're in the early stages of it, and we're talking about the point where they hit a brick wall, and but they were still buying into the concept themselves, and they leveraged themselves as much as they could to get started. So you're at the end of, I guess you're leveraged out, you built your first location.
Correct.
So now at this point, you've got to run the location, you've got to ask for money. You're still in school. Are you still in school at that point?
No, graduated.
Okay, so you've graduated at that point. And then you've got to market the business. You've got to find customers. So what roles did you all decide to take?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I mean, we have to wear all the hats. I mean, if you're launching a business and you have this idea that a lot of people are doubting. I mean, at the time, this notion of getting intensive coaching for college admissions was pretty new to most people, right? This is 2000, and nowadays, I mean, you have it for college acceptance, you have it for sports, you have it for music, but at the time it was more of a rarity, and so. We knew how many students we needed to get, right? We needed to get around 65 students, for the business to have positive cash flow.
Per location.
And
okay.
we only had one location at the time.
Right.
And so, we just started doing math. I mean, we looked at, all right, there's 3 high schools, within a 2.5 mile radius of where we originally opened our location, right? So we were very keen on, all right, where is our target customers? We also opened up right outside of Baltimore, where I'm from originally. So, we had a lot of contacts, right? We had a lot of people we knew at the schools. We knew people at churches, synagogues. I mean, you name it. We hit the pavement. Really getting the word out. Talking about how college counseling and early preparation helps you get into school. So really educating parents and really educating people in the marketplace about what this product that we were providing, would really do to help their students at the end of the day. And we did that all during construction time, right? So what we really wanted to do was, all right, once construction ended, we knew we had to start paying rent, and we knew, hey, we need to start paying for expenses. The 3-4 months prior to that, I mean, we were literally visiting, every school almost on a daily basis. Like, what can we do to offer? What can we do to provide free services? When we weren't, kind of supervising, people picking up hammers and laying carpet down.
So, at any point in time, did you say maybe this wasn't such a good idea?
I mean, once we made the decision to plow, what savings we had.
You kind of were all in, right?
I mean, you're all in. You're pot committed, and the great thing is, we kind of did some, you do some math in your head. I mean, we were 21, 22 at the time. We had no families to support, so there wasn't much baggage that was holding us down, right? So making that bet on ourselves and making that bet on the idea that we had, wasn't a great leap of faith for us as individuals. Obviously, if someone who is in a different stage of life, it'd be very different. What is
the margin on your business?
The margin on our business is around 30%.
30%, and that's after rent and everything.
Everything.
That's a very good margin.
It is. It's a very.
And you would think there's not a lot of, compared to other kinds of businesses, not as capital intensive as other businesses.
Correct.
Although you felt it was very intensive when you'd leveraged yourself out, I guess.
I mean, relative to obviously a restaurant
right.
or something, that requires you to buy machinery and whatnot. Obviously, very capital light.
So, and once you got one location up, what made you say, all right, let's go do another.
Yeah, so, we spent almost 9 months trying to determine where we're going to open our first location. And so we actually did a survey of almost the entire East Coast, all the way up from Boston, all the way down to Atlanta, actually, trying to determine, where would give us the best opportunity for success. I mean, we weren't tethered to any place. Again, going back to, we had no family, we had no kids.
Right.
I mean, we could literally live anywhere and start this business anywhere. And so we actually ranked, almost 200 centers, 200 towns and cities up and down the East Coast that we liked. We actually built it at the one that was ranked 100 because we felt like the family support and the friend support of doing something from where we were from would give us more success. But from a location perspective, it actually wasn't the best.
This was Baltimore?
It's Baltimore. Yeah.
Where in Baltimore? What area?
It's in Baltimore County. It's a town called Timonium.
Okay. And what made you, so your first location was Baltimore?
Correct. And yeah.
And there a lot of things went into that, demographics, but also where you would feel comfortable, be able to I guess you knew a lot of people there, so you could kind of get the word out.
Correct. So from a marketing perspective, we felt like we didn't have to start anew. We knew people in the local chambers. We knew people at all the schools, at the libraries, at other cultural establishments within the area. And so, getting the word out proved to be a lot easier, even though it wasn't as dense, or some of the traditional demographic numbers weren't as strong. Leveraging that was a huge advantage, despite the market not being as strong as it.
Were you surprised that and I guess at Harvard that it sounded like there was a lot of demand for what you were trying to do? Were you surprised that you had to work so hard to find your first customers?
No, not really. I think Harvard was unique in terms of the school is there, and so parents.
They expect it.
They expect it. They see it, and they desire it because it's in their face. I didn't go through any type of tutoring or coaching. When I was a high school student, my mom tried to put me into a program at Princeton Review, and my cousin and I, we went there. He pretended to be my guardian. We got a refund, and we went to the beach all summer. Is what we did, right? And so. For me, I thought it was.
Does Mom know this? Now she does.
If she hears the show, she'll probably know this. I had a great time, and I
learned a lot.
I learned a lot about something, So we knew we had to educate people, but we kind of started the business at a good time. So there's definitely some luck involved as well. The college acceptances were getting much more harder. People were getting more aware of college rankings that are in like the U.S.
I'm thinking back on those years. I know that college tutoring was brand new.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff started happening back then. Yeah. Travel sports started happening back then, where parents were getting more and more aware of the fact that I've got to really open up my child's eyes, and they would do that with sports, with education, with a lot of different things. Interesting. So as you started the first center, how quickly did you get to your break even?
Yeah, so we actually had 10 students when we opened up our center day one. So we had started off going door to door to people's homes. So while construction was happening, we actually went to people's houses to enroll them and to start the tutoring process with students, and we would show them this diagram, this layout of what the center would look like that was provided by our architect and the space plans. And say, hey, it's coming. This is real. This is not like some scam. And so we were able to start with a good number of students right away, and we got to break even within 3 months, actually.
Wow. Now, I think I know the answer to this question, but as you started to put money in the bank, not taking it out, you were still thinking about the future, so you kept the money in the bank, I would think.
Correct.
Okay. And that's another mistake we hear about a lot, where you start making some profits, and unfortunately you stop putting it into the business and you start putting it in your pocket. Yeah. And therefore you've kind of eliminated the chance to expand. Yeah. So when did you decide, hey, we need to go do another one of these things?
So 9 months into it, we felt like the business was pretty stable. We felt like we had a product that really had legs. I mean, we were convinced between Jim and myself, but we weren't convinced that the market was completely ready. And when we saw that this business was actually sustainable, 9 months going in, we started to look for locations, actually 2 and 3 that we did at month 15 and 17.
And so what that first center? How many students did you have there before you went to the next one?
We had almost 90 students.
90 students. Yeah. So you're well above break even, a sustainable model. Everything's looking good. You decide to go to number 2 and number 3. So at that point, how were you funding everything?
Yeah, so for number 2 and 3, since we had one location down, we actually leveraged the same landlord to do 2 and 3, and we got them to build the centers for us, so we didn't have to put any capital into them.
Did you have to give up any ownership for doing that?
We didn't.
You just signed a lease?
Yeah.
All right. And then they did all the TI?
They did all the TI.
So you may have had to pay up a little bit for the rent, but you're paying back all the TI?
Correct.
Okay. And then At what point did you say, wait a minute, we got to go raise money to do our expansion? Or did you?
Well, we didn't. So
Okay.
in locations 2 and 3, we opened those in the Northern Virginia market right outside of D.C. in Fairfax County, which was just booming at the time.
Yeah.
And the demand for a product was just like they had never like seen tutoring before. They had never like seen food before. I mean, I don't know what it was.
Right.
And so those two, I mean, they did double what our first one, Timonium, did, and so that allowed us to basically, get to 10 centers within 36 months.
What did it? Tell me the experience or the feeling when you sat back and you went, "Wow, this is working."
Yeah, I mean, definitely when we hit double digits, it was pretty amazing. I mean, we were still very hands-on in all parts of the business at the time. At that size, it's kind of funny. We were still able to leverage a lot of our personal networks, within the Mid-Atlantic area. And so, all of those centers in the beginning, even though we didn't have, structured training for our tutoring, we hired someone that we had personally known either, in college or in high school that we knew was a very good student that could really explain things very well. And we kept quality control, just from the fact that we could vouch for that individual.
What were the difficulties of the business back then?
Well, the biggest difficulty was finding, counselors,
I was going to say, yeah.
Talk to parents, B, be able to collect tuition from parents, right? So, when you have a 21, 22-year-old college kid, asking a parent to pay tuition, sometimes they just kind of brush him aside and ignore him or her.
We'll get to that, right.
Yeah. So, and so finding individuals that really believed in what we were doing, that understood, kind of what the mission and purpose would be, and that could be more business-minded, that was absolutely the biggest challenge in the business.
What part of the business did you enjoy the most back in those days?
Oh, I mean, every aspect is.
Did you ever miss actually doing the hands-on tutoring?
I do. I mean, working at the physical center is the most enjoyable part about what we do. I mean, when we started growing, like where we are today, you don't get to live and breathe the stories. You don't interact with the students and see, the immediate difference that you're making on a day in, day out basis, or the thank yous that you get from parents and students when they get their college admissions letter in the springtime. I mean, that time of year, if you physically go to a center, I mean, it's just you just overflow with just kind of the emotional, benefit that you get from that.
Right. I can only imagine. Because there's some really bright kids out there now. I don't know what's in the water, but my children are 10 times more smarter than I am and more capable, and I don't know why that is. And I see that with their friends, and I see that as they go through school and go through life. So you mentioned that you did franchise at one point.
We did.
But let's talk about that experience.
Yeah, so
because we just had a show on franchising.
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges for us was finding kind of that manager at a location to really be able to talk to parents, be able to counsel parents and students, and really handle the business side of what it is that we do.
Was that the key to success? Was that person the manager of the location?
Oh, absolutely, and
okay.
and it still is today. I mean, that's the number one hire that we're always constantly looking for as we've been expanding the business. And so, finding such an individual who had a vested interest in the success of the students, the parents, as well as the financial success of the physical center, we thought franchising might be a natural way to go about solving that question. And there's a lot of people in the education space that go that route as well too.
And so tell me about getting ready for the franchise, your actual sale, what kind of marketing you did, what'd you learn from all that?
Yeah, we learned that we weren't very good at it. Okay, number one, becoming a franchisor is a business in itself, right? You are in the business of selling a business to other individuals and getting them to succeed in that business at the end of the day. And so obviously going to franchise trade shows, franchise conventions, putting advertisements out, whether it's in the USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, Entrepreneur Magazine, whatever it might be, and being able to do a tour and a meet and greet with individuals for a franchise prospectus is obviously very different from what we were doing on a day-to-day basis with the consumers.
And then the franchisor selection must be critical, because one thing that we've learned to lending in franchises is the franchisor doesn't want a franchisee not to perform well.
That's correct.
It's a major risk. You're having to almost hand select your initial franchisees.
Correct. So we were, when we started franchising, we're early 20s, and so we thought we thought a little differently at the time, right? So we learned that lesson as well too. So we thought if you have money, you qualify. was our initial belief that an individual is able to accrue so much capital, they must have the wherewithal to have done that, and hence they should have the wherewithal to protect their investment to do well in the business.
Right.
And we quickly learned that a third did, a third kind of were so-so, and a third were not very good.
And in today's world of regulation, all that has to be disclosed to every subsequent franchisee. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so how many franchises did you sell?
We sold 45. Today we have 28. So
you mentioned you started buying them back. Now, what was the reason for buying them back?
So we bought back a lot of the underperformers.
Okay.
They were obviously hurting our brand. They were not delivering on the promises as well as we felt like they should. So the majority of the 28 that are in existence today are very good operators. I mean, they are, to your point, the ones that we should have only selected in the beginning. I mean, they deliver a great product, for the communities that they serve. They really, help, promote, the C2 brand, and they have a very good living as well doing it. So.
Well, and I think you brought up an excellent point by saying it's really two separate businesses.
Oh, it is.
And I don't think people realize that when they start to franchise. They think, well, I'm just going to be doing this more somewhere else. But it is really two separate businesses.
No, absolutely. I mean, you have to have the separate support system, accounting, training.
Different mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned that you were the CEO, but now you've stepped down. So let's talk about that transition. It must be tough to be the founder and then decide I'm going to step back a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been running the company for 17 years actually. A couple of years ago, we brought in a private investment company, a private equity group, invested in C2 around 6.5 years ago. And helping us take the business to the next level. I mean, at the time, we had 62 corporate centers and 45 franchisees. Today we have over 200 corporate centers with the 28 franchisees. So we've more than doubled the business today, and almost tripled the business. And so one of the things that we felt like we needed was we needed a partner who could help mentor us, right? Who could really help help us build a world-class team when it comes to human resource, marketing, the whole 9 yards. And so we were able to bring on some really great people and really build a business that could really be independent of its founders. And I think that's what you want. I mean, we built a business. Our goal was to get students to be independent learners and independent individuals eventually, away from their parents, away from school, and we wanted the same for the company one day as well.
Well, one of the things that I'm hearing is that of being pretty humble. And when you mentioned franchising, we really didn't know how to do that very well. I think it takes a lot to realize that, hey, wait a minute, we weren't able to do that real well, so now we got to go back and kind of refocus. Correct. And then this decision to bring in private equity, that must have been a tough decision.
It was.
Because you're giving up your company.
Yes, you're giving up control. It was very different. It was a great learning experience, but definitely, a lot of your day-to-day decision making is really beholden to an outside board, and you are delivering on promises that you made to your investors.
And in that process, I guess your thought process: if I give up this, I'm going to get more of that.
Correct.
But I'm going to lose control, and some people have trouble with that decision.
Yeah, so it is very challenging. We had a few individuals that left because of the changes. I mean, when we were a completely privately held company, the only promises that we had to really be aware of was the promises we made to our customers, mm-hmm. A, and the promises we made to the people that were working at C2, right? That was A and B. Now you've thrown in a third promise that you've made to your investors, which don't always
they come in expecting a growth rate.
Correct. So they don't always tie together with the promise you make to a customer or a promise you make to an employee. Sometimes goes against to a promise you make to an investor.
How do you make that decision?
Well, at the end of the day, you want to make the right decision. And so for me, the last 6 years has been arguing on behalf of the customer and our employee that decisions geared toward that lens in the long run will ultimately accrue to the investor, right? And so we've actually had a great investment group that really understands that have been very patient. They continue to be investors in C2. They don't have any intention of getting out of C2 anytime soon because they understand that value proposition. And so when we looked for a group to partner with, we really wanted to find someone that really understood that, and so
understood how it really ran.
Correct.
Okay.
Obviously, they'll make some knee-jerk reactions
sure.
Frequently, and so it's always trying to manage them and be able to explain to them that the decisions that we're making as a leadership team is ultimately the right one.
That's fascinating. Yeah. The transitions you've been able to make and talking about the thought process behind each of them has been very helpful today, because we often talk about how to go to the next level and the changes you have to make in the business plan, the changes you have to make within yourself, taking on different roles that you're not used to, all those things. And it sounds like you've been able to do all that extremely well.
It's been a great journey.
So what's the next step?
The next step is really, kind of exploring, further things in education. I mean, one of the things that has been great about, having a new group of partners has been keeping us very focused on, growing our business, and growth for our partners has meant, expanding, building more locations. I've had a lot of passions beyond that, whether it's in education technology, charter schools, and other kind of areas that have come across my way, while being at C2, and now the opportunity, the time has come that I can actually explore some of these things away from being the CEO from a day-to-day basis.
All right, you don't have to answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. All right, you started off with $50,000 out of a graduate school college fund and 20 credit cards maxed out. I guess that totaled about $100,000.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've gotten that paid back.
Yeah.
What do you think the company's worth nowadays?
Today, it's probably worth around $200 million today.
$200 million.
Yeah.
Not a bad day's work. Not a bad day. Not bad for two Harvard kids, right? Coming from Baltimore. Did Jim come from Baltimore as well?
He's from Philadelphia.
He's from Philly.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's happy these days. The Eagles are doing well.
Okay. So. All right. Well, listen, it's been wonderful talking to you. It's been
a lot of fun, Joe.
This is a great story. You can, you've got a lot you can help small business people with, because a lot of folks going through all those mental challenges. I had a small business myself once. It did really well. I was unable to basically make the step from not doing it and trying to run it.
Yeah, that's the biggest. I say that's the biggest leap.
Yeah, and I struggled with that because I really like doing it. and I guess I wanted to make sure that it kept getting done as well as I thought I could do it, and so that was the big leap that I struggled with.
I totally agree. Going from that A to B is the huge.
Yeah, and any business that's in a growth mode is going to have to wrestle with all these things that you had to wrestle with. So it's very interesting. Okay, David, one last thing. Someone's trying to start their own company. Some advice.
I mean, it all starts with an idea. You got to have a lot of passion in that idea, because it's not going to. There's not going to be immediate financial rewards on a day-to-day basis. You got to set the business up. You're going to have to get a lot of things set up to get it done. I mean, you're going to hear a lot of discouragement, and so without having that passion for the idea, at the end of the day, it's really hard to kind of power through and see the light at the end of the tunnel. So, that's something I think that's very important is beginning with the idea that you can really get behind.
And I think something my dad used to tell me all the time, when you're doing a small business or in any line of work that you're really close to, you can't just be involved. You have to be committed. Yeah. And so, well, what's the difference? He says, well, think about the chicken and the I'm sorry, I messed up the story. Eggs and bacon. Eggs and bacon. Yeah. You like eggs and bacon? Yeah. And he says, well, the chicken is involved, and that pig's committed. So just think.
That's true. You got to be the pig. I totally agree.
So anyway, Dave, thank you, and great talking to you. Hopefully we can get you back on. Well, anyway, that's the show for the day. On the Money, brought to you by NBC National Bank. I'm Joe Moss, your moderator. Really enjoyed talking with David today. And as you know, Embassy National Bank is a nationally chartered bank with deposits insured by the FDIC. We love to help small businesses and very frequently do so. Our job is the passion of helping small business, and hopefully the growth will follow from that. And enjoyed this talk today, and we frequently talk about things to remember as we leave the air, just some basic things. And I guess the first one is it's all about the passion first when you're going to start a business. Obviously, you got to figure out whether there's a margin. Be ready for failure, man. And it's going to take some dark days. There'll be a time, and when it doesn't feel like it's going to work, but just keep going. And then the other thing is always be aware that the plan is going to change, and you got to transition, and change in your business as it grows is inevitable. So with that, we're going to close this show, and we'll see you next time.